Is an old school V8 more fun than an EV, or am I just nostalgic for a simpler time? That's right, that is a Challenger Scat Pack, and it's here because last time I fully tested an electric Charger, I said, there's something about the whole experience that feels just a bit sterile. There's no drama, and you know what? I kind of miss it. So my boss said, if you love the old car so much, prove it, and poof, this thing appeared. I should have compared it to a Lamborghini or like a really good sandwich. When do we get to eat? Here at Edmunds, we test everything. So that means we're going to take the gas Challenger, put it through its paces, and then check those numbers against what the Charger Daytona electric put up to see what the difference in performance is. And then we'll do some laps around our handling course because how they drive is just as important as what they can do. And we'll check out those interiors, all in an effort to find out if I'm remembering the gas-powered Challenger correctly or if I'm just seeing it through Hemi-colored glasses. These muscle cars with big V8s have always struggled at our test track, and that's because our drag strip is just regular asphalt. It's not a prep surface, so they always struggle for traction. And this thing, with its 485 horsepower going through just the rear wheels, is going to have the same struggles. To get the best time, we use launch control. So I activate launch control here on the screen, put it at 2,000 RPM, so we get a little bit of wheel slip, but not too much. And then it is just left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas, and away we go. Still plenty of slip there. And across the line. So our best time in the Challenger Scat Pack was about a second slower to 60 and a second slower in the quarter mile as well. Now, if you want to see how we got that time in the Charger Daytona, you can check out our other fully tested video. But when you think about it, the fact that it has 200-ish more horsepower, all-wheel drive, and launch control of its own, you might expect it to be way more than a second quicker than this car with all of its struggles for grip. Weighing in at more than 4,000 pounds, the Challenger might seem heavy, but that electric Charger, it weighs close to 6,000 pounds, and that negates its horsepower advantage because these two cars wind up with basically the exact same power to weight ratio. So a lot of that extra acceleration comes down to all-wheel drive traction. But having 4 drive wheels doesn't help with braking, and the old Challenger actually stopped shorter than the Charger. This wide body also has a hair more lateral grip on our skid pad. And here's the big catch. Those numbers for the Charger were for the vehicle we featured in our fully tested video on really sticky summer tires, which are a $700 option. This Charger Daytona is the one we bought ourselves to add to our year-long road test fleet. And this has the standard all-season tires on it, which add range, but for performance testing, that's bad news. Without those sticky tires, the Daytona loses a little speed in a straight line, but its braking and lateral grip numbers suffer a lot more. And I'm just guessing here, but I don't think less stopping and cornering performance is going to make this car any better or more enjoyable to drive on the track, which was our big problem last time. The Daytona starts to unravel when it gets pushed. One last test for you. Last time we were out here, the electric Charger Daytona lived up to Dodge's promise of a 126 decibel fake engine noise, for better or worse. So we figured we might as well see how loud the real thing is. All right, Albert, let's see how we did. Oh, 113.9, not bad, but not quite as loud. For worse, because I think this thing still sounds way better. Right, Albert? Look, I can already hear you typing,
"Oh, why didn't you get a Hellcat?"
Well, for the Hellcat obsessed, here are the numbers for you for the Daytona versus a lot of the things that we've tested out here with Hellcat motors under the hood. And go ahead and pause if you want to let them sink in. We wanted to do Scat Pack versus Scat Pack for a reason, and not just because they have about the same power to weight ratio. We also wanted to do it because to us, the Scat Pack is the most pure form of Challenger that there was. You still get a big, naturally aspirated V8 under the hood and a stripped out interior to help keep the price down. And if you got a wide body version like this one, you got a lot of the handling goodies that the Hellcat also enjoyed. And personally for me, this is my favorite form of the Challenger. So I really wanted to go like for like to see what has become of my beloved Scat Pack in its most modern interpretation. And with a Charger Banshee on the way, don't worry, we can still bring a Hellcat later. Oh, there is nothing quite like launching these big muscle cars. Oh, this thing, when it thunders down the straights, that's when it's really, really at home. But our handling circuit does have a lot of curves, and there is where this thing starts to get a lot less comfortable. I'm remembering now that driving these things is a bit like driving a boat. It just kind of leans over everywhere. You really feel that, especially coming over the hill here where you get a lot of weight transfer and you need to really dip the car down into this turn, and everything just swings way out. With that big engine out in front, there is a bit of understeer as you're coming into these corners. Just like that one right there, wind it out, there we go. But then at the same time, you have to be real careful with your throttle inputs because this is incredibly tail happy. We're driving in track mode, so it allows for a little bit of slip, but you still have to be pretty careful with the throttle. Otherwise, this thing has a tendency to want to flip around and have you pointing in the wrong direction. But as you can tell from the look on my face, even though this is not a track car like maybe the new Mustang is, where it's a muscle car, yes, but also agile enough to kind of feel like a sports car, this thing is muscle car. And getting it around our handling circuit at any kind of pace like this, it is challenging. Because you're dealing with a lot of weight going around. You can see just in these turns here, I'm just fighting the car, hoping I have enough grip. These Scat Pack versions with all those wide body upgrades, those are pretty essential. Without them, this car is too unruly. And with them, it's just tameable enough that you can get out here on a circuit and have a pretty rolling good time. Driving one of these things around here, it's kind of like a bit like wrestling a bear. It's all fur and teeth and nails. And yes, you're fighting it, but at least there's a predictability about it. Like I know that if I carry slightly too much speed into a corner, kind of like that, the nose is gonna push on me slightly, and I know that if I get on the throttle too early and don't let the car rebalance itself, the rear end is gonna slide on me. But at least within that tension, there's a predictability and an honesty to this car. Okay. Let's see what the electric one can do. Getting back behind the wheel of the V8 powered Challenger had me in a good mood. And now it's time to see if the Charger Daytona can keep the good times rolling, or if it's still not great. Not great. So here we are in the electric Charger. And last time we were out here, we were in one with the summer tires. But again, this has all seasons and less grip has definitely not improved the formula. Oh man. Oh, I gotta ease it through this thing. Oh, that front end is sketchy. Oh, it's everywhere. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. These tires are not having a good time. Oh my goodness. The hairpin here, the front end feels like it pushes even more. There's a lot of tire noise, and on the straight here, it's just fighting for grip. Here we come down into the chicane. Oh my goodness, this thing is still really, really unstable under braking. It feels even worse. And you get absolutely no feel through the steering wheel, all the instability you have to feel through the seat. So here on the back straight, we gotta go hard on the brakes with chicane, and oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, the back end is just wiggling around. It almost feels like it's like locking up, but it might just be that this thing is so heavy that it's just pounding those tires into the ground and it's just sliding around. And I feel nothing through the wheel. The wheel is just dead straight, but I can feel the back end of the car just doing this behind me. It's also not real consistent in some of the laps that we do here. It does decently well, but then in others, if you just get on those brakes like a smidge too hard, it just really feels lost. Ugh. The regenerative braking also doesn't really come on smoothly. So at times when you're in a corner, it feels like you brake for the corner and then the regen brakes grab again, and that upsets the nose, and then that makes it push even more, and then you're just fighting all the time with this car. Also, if we do too many hard laps in a row with this thing, the regen will just shut off completely. It'll just give up. A little orange air will appear. Hard on the brakes again, for better or worse. Oh, God. It just feels awful under braking. The stability control also has a tendency to kick in at like the least opportune times. Even sometimes like mid-corner, it'll just like cut power to one of the wheels and upset the balance of the car even more. It has less body roll than the gas car for sure, thanks to that adaptive suspension. But it doesn't feel any more stable. Everything about this car just feels really unpredictable. You kind of have to approach it very, very cautiously. And out here, that makes it really not fun to drive around. So while you can hustle this thing around our track a lot more quickly than you can the gas Challenger, it's just an incredibly unsatisfying experience. Everything from the sound to the way it steers to the unpredictability of how the chassis is going to react. The numbers don't lie. This thing is faster. It's far from better. So if driving the Challenger is a bit like wrestling a bear, at least you know what you're getting into. This is a bit like sitting down next to a giant bear with like a cute little blue button on it, and it's trying to kind of fool you into the fact that it's not a bear, until at a moment when you're not really paying super close attention, you turn and next to you, oh my God, that's a big greasy bear. And then it eats you. Hold on, tires. Oh. The interior of the Challenger Scat Pack delivers an old school experience, just like you're getting when you're driving it out on the track. The screen, not the biggest by modern standards, but you do still get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay with a wire, just like the FBI would like. But the thing that I really dig is that it still has physical gauges here, so there's a little digital screen between them, but watching the needle bounce up and down on an old school tachometer is just really, really satisfying, along with the sounds that this engine makes and all that good stuff. And also these front seats, I like them quite a bit, enough bolstering to keep you in place while still being really comfortable. Now here in the Charger EV, a much more modern looking and feeling interior. Two big screens like you're gonna find in all the new cars these days. If you think about it, Dodge hasn't really released anything new for quite a while. The Charger, Durango, Challenger, they all lasted for a decade or more with just kind of the interiors that they had. So this thing has been their first sort of chance to really clean slate a new interior. And unfortunately, I have to say that it sort of lacks the personality that those other vehicles had. And that's not to say this is a bad interior. I think that the controls are intuitively laid out. I actually really like the placement of this screen because it's super easy to reach for both passengers, but I look around and I don't really see anything that would really tell me this is a Charger or Challenger. I mean, you even get a square sort of like steering wheel here, but that's really a Corvette signature these days. And instead of being itself and just being a Dodge, it tries to be a Corvette. And on top of that, it sort of tries to be a good car, and it just ends up not being a good car. The seats are also a big problem in this car. I mentioned in the Challenger how much I like the seats. I hate these seats more than I like those seats. And that's not because they're bad materials. They have this nice sort of like suede insert here, but they also lack cushioning, and more importantly, they lack bolstering. So if you're doing any kind of spirited driving, you just end up sliding out of them to the left and to the right. And because the car feels so sloppy on the front end, it just exacerbates the feeling of that you don't really know what those front wheels are doing. Now that being said, the back seat is gigantic. This is the biggest coupe back seat that I can remember, and that's for a good reason, because a four-door version of this car is coming later, and that's why this is a replacement for both the Challenger and the Charger. And in the four-door version of this car, they're not really going to change anything about this interior. They're just going to move the pillar up and add another door. The thing that I do like most about this vehicle though is that in the back, you're getting a legitimate hatch. So the Challenger has always had a bunch of cargo room, but it's had a really small, like sort of space to fit things in there. This thing, the giant hatch opens all the way up. Tons of cargo space. You could even fit 4 wheels and tires in there for a track day, though with this car, you probably shouldn't take it to a track because you might not make it back. Okay, I'll admit I was probably a little bit hard on the Charger Daytona during that interior section, but if we're being honest, we have been disappointed in this vehicle in the time that we've owned it, and a big part of that is price. Now the Challenger Scat Pack wide body that we have here, if you adjusted it into today's money, it would cost around $65,000, and that's not cheap. But the Charger Daytona, it starts at 10 grand more than that, and the one that we bought cost us over $80,000. And for that money, yes, you are getting all-wheel drive, you are getting more speed, but what you're not getting is any more fun, and you're definitely not getting any personality. The Challenger is by no means a perfect vehicle, but it is an honest one. It's got a big old engine up front, it sends all of its power to the rear, and yes, it's going to jump up and bite you sometimes, but you'll see, and more importantly, you'll feel it coming. In sharp contrast, the Charger, if you try to drive it hard at all, it feels wildly unpredictable. The stability control is doing weird things, the throttle and the brakes are all doing weird things, and you don't feel anything through the steering wheel, so it just ends up feeling like you're driving a 6,000-pound boat around and having no idea what's going on underneath you. For vehicles in our year-long test fleet, even the ones that we don't like, we can usually find something semi-redeeming about them over time. But the more time that I spend behind the wheel of that Charger and the more time it spends in our garage, it just doesn't feel any better. We just keep finding things to not like about it. And the best thing I can say about it is it's got a nice screen, and that's really not what you want to say about your muscle car. So if you're asking me which of these two vehicles I would rather take home, it's the one that looks better, sounds better, drives better, and isn't lying to me. Thanks for watching.